All right, well, welcome to our first fully digital panel of 2024. Today's all about BYOVs and site-specific and immersive work at the Hollywood Fringe. My name is Lois. My pronouns are she, her. I am your co-festival director. My other co, Ellen, is here as well. So she'll be in the chat until I am done with this spiel, and then I'll jump in for any questions and comments that come up. Before we jump in, I want to acknowledge the Hollywood Fringe acknowledges that we are on the unceded lands of the Tongva, Gabrielinos, Quiche, and Gabrielinos people. Our statement serves as a practice as we commit to furthering our connection to Indigenous communities past, present, and emerging. We do have our auto captioning on today to provide access, but remember that interpreters are available upon request to any of our workshops. So if you do want that, please send a request to support@hollywoodfringe.org within 72 hours of the workshop or panel, and we will make sure one is provided to you. This is being live streamed and recorded to our YouTube channel. So hello, anyone who is watching on YouTube. I will hop over to that chat after, again, I finish the spiel to make sure you have someone to interact with there as well. Registration is now open. Yay. I don't know if anyone knows that, but hopefully you do. You have until April 15th to be included in this year's printed guide. So still lots of time, but I will note, I highly recommend registering earlier rather than later if you are able, because that will automatically sign you up for our participant newsletter, which is the best way to make sure you are not missing a beat, a deadline, or program opportunities that come your way this festival season. Like the Artist Fund, which is now open. We're accepting applications now through February 19th. That fund is designed for all low-income Angelenos who are bringing their work to Hollywood Fringe in 2024. We have 24 going out this year, so please sign up. We want to make sure 24 shows get some extra funding this year. Before I hand it over to our brilliant moderator and longtime Fringer, Annie Lesser, I'm going to talk about kind of the Fringe process when it comes to BYOV, like the logistics and steps that you will have to do in order to participate at Fringe. So the Fringe side of the guidelines. It's pretty easy. As long as you follow the steps. First step is email support@hollywoodfringe.org. You're going to want to make sure you make contact with us because we will be in contact throughout the process. Make sure you have permissions. That's needed by Fringe. This could be permitting, depending on where it is, or permissions of businesses or spaces that you are occupying. When it comes to permissions, this year we do have a form that'll make it a little easier for you. So again, reach out to Hollywood Fringe or support@hollywoodfringe.org, and we will make sure you have these materials. We also, of course, require that you have insurance. And that's for every production, but with if you're bringing your own venue, you won't have a venue to go with or add on to. So make sure you have $1 million general liability insurance and provide a certificate naming Hollywood Fringe, or rather Hatchery Arts, DBA, the Hollywood Fringe Festival, as an additionally insured on that policy. We will need that in place before we can make your venue public on the Fringe website. We will also this year, and this is new, have a HFF staff site visit. This is just a 30-minute check-in. This is not like, I am not a city inspector. We're just looking to make sure that the space you plan to perform at is generally safe for audience, and that you have a plan when operating the space. And then, of course, you will be acting as a Fringe venue manager. That comes with creating a venue page on the website, scheduling your performances, kind of managing the back end of that venue experience. So you'll be wearing two hats at Fringe. So that's something to consider, but staff will walk you through all of that and how to actually use the website in regards to ticketing and things when that time comes. But just know that will be an additional hat you wear if you're bringing your own venue. I think things to note: you will have more communication with Fringe staff if you are bringing your own venue to Fringe. And that's just to make sure that safety, that there's a plan in place, that all of these things are aligned because you are now a venue manager. If your show is traveling, this is important to note. So anything that's traveling has to start and end in the Fringe zone. It doesn't matter where you go during, as long as it does start and end in the same location in the Fringe zone. What is the Fringe zone, you might ask? So it's basically a approximately 3-mile radius of Central Hollywood. That's where all of our registered venues are already within. So that's north on Franklin, it's Normandy to the east, south is Rosewood, and west is Fairfax. So anything in those parameters, good to go, as long as it's safe and you have permissions, that's gonna work for you. Okay, I think that is officially it from the Fringe side. Obviously, we'll be around for questions. Again, email support@hollywoodfringe.org if this is a route you're going down, and we will help make sure you have all of the materials for success. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Annie Lesser, our brilliant moderator, and the panelists who are going to provide actual experience information. So please take it away. Oh, Annie is muted.
Sorry about that. Can everyone hear me now? Are we good? Okay. Hi, my name is Annie. My pronouns are she, they, and z. I am currently wearing a black sweater, and above it there is a vest that has a red lining along the V and the arms, and I have a black and white checker pattern on it with various flowers that are pink, purple, yellow, red. I have brown, short, curly hair. I have translucent glasses, blue eyes, a fair complexion, and my background is kind of burgundy painted wall. I am going to pass this around to all of my amazing panelists, but I like each of them when they introduce themselves to tell us, how long they've done theater / Fringe for. So take it away, guys.
Hit it, John.
Hi, my name is John Henningsen. I am the executive director of Family Arts within the Fringe Circle. I'm also the creative producer of the Speakeasy Society. I'm a white male with a burgundy hoodie on, glasses, and a very impressive mustache. It's a little daunting how impressive it is. My pronouns are he, him. I've been a part of the Fringe for 5 years, something like that. I run a venue. Family Arts is one of the venues within the circle. I've been doing theater for 20 or 30 years in different aspects, immersive theater, site-specific theater, and then traditional theater itself. What's the next question?
Oh, no. Let's pop it over to Jansen.
Hi, my name is Jansen Lalich. My pronouns are he, him. I am the creator and producer of Cricklewood Immersive. I have participated twice with the Hollywood Fringe Festival, once in 2021, performing and writing and directing the online experience, The Sleepover, which was a 90s middle school sleepover experience, and then writing and directing a show in 2023 called Boston Bar Bloodsuckers. That was a Cheers murder mystery with vampires. And my description is I am a white male with short, disheveled brown hair, tortoiseshell glasses. I'm wearing a blue sweatshirt, and I'm in a kind of a cream room that's a little too brightly lit for my preferences. Take it away, Katie.
Let me unmute myself. I muted myself so you wouldn't hear my doggies who decide to go off every time I'm on Zoom. I am Katie Foley. I am a creator, producer, and I run a company called Catnip Company with my producing partner, Lena Valentine. Physical description, I have blondish brown hair, not naturally, pretty long, and I'm wearing a tropical blue dress because I'm about to go on my honeymoon in Hawaii, so I was trying on the outfits that I got for that. I'm like, why don't I wear it to the Fringe panel? As far as my experience with Fringe goes, my first time with Fringe, I was a performer in a stage reading years and years ago, and then myself and Lena, we brought a show called Best Night Ever, which was an immersive bachelor / bachelorette party that With the entire show was in a limo that went around, or two limos, I should say, that went around Hollywood. And the audience members were either part of the bachelor party or the bachelorette party. So yeah, it's a little about me.
Nice. Okay. So I'd love to just ask anyone in whatever order you want to talk about this in. How did you go about finding your bring your own venue to Fringe? I know that my first bring your own venue to Fringe was my apartment, so that was pretty easy because I live in the Fringe zone, luckily, and I already had it insured partially as an art space because I had at the time my second bedroom as a photo studio space and it was already insured. So I'd love to know what everyone else's first BYOV experiences were like when it came to the Fringe.
I'll say when I put up the sleepover, so that was 2021, that was on Zoom, but the year before, which was 2020, if anyone remembers, I was planning on putting it up in an actual rental space in Hollywood that I'd found on Peerspace, the website where you can kind of like rent spaces by the hour. And coincidentally, just this woman who owned the place was offering it for events for cheap, and I went and talked to her and asked if she might be willing to host it for this show for the Fringe, and she was very friendly and interested in trying it out. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and those plans fell through. And so, actually, later that year, I decided to adapt the show to a Zoom format instead. And so the first run of it was in late 2020. And I mean, as far as, having to worry about set design and decoration, boy, that was a lot easier to do on Zoom than to try to actually like build it out, especially when you're dealing with like 90s props that you want to like, it's like ideally I would have loved to have like a 90s everything, TV and, Mac, with the cobalt blue, like and everything, and that would have cost a lot of money to get those props together. And then with a little clever play on the computer, I was able to kind of make it work and not have to pay a penny for any of that stuff. So that was very, very convenient.
That you actually reminded me that my apartment wasn't my first BYO venue. My first year at Fringe, I rented a dance studio. So you made me remember that. And that I actually had wanted to find a venue where there were mirrors on the walls for my show. And so you helped me remember that I've done things like that too when you're talking about your Peerspace experience. Katie, how about you?
So the premise of our show originally was just kind of the idea of New Year's Eve, right? Like New Year's Eve has so much hype, but it never lives up to your expectations. So we adopted that with the bachelor party and with the bachelorette party, which made our lives so much easier because really the whole story was about them they were like about to go somewhere and then they wouldn't go anywhere. And they really just were kind of stuck in the limo. We were fortunate enough that predominantly most of the cast and crew worked at Cloak and Dagger at the time, and we became great friends with the staff there. So they let us use RIP Pig and Whistle for our start and stop location. And then once we started developing the story, then we figured out, okay, what are the other stops? Like we were in the story, I play the bride, and I get into a fight with my soon-to-be husband, and so we decide to go see my ex-boyfriend, and it turns out he's a stripper, so we almost went to a strip club, but we didn't end up going in. So it was a lot of just figuring out the storyline and then where we would stop, and then finding an excuse for us to not actually make that stop, like not actually enter into that building or into that space, and getting us back into the limo and then going from there. So a long-winded answer of just, the plans that don't really go to fruition, right? So that's how we kind of found our different venues.
Got it. Okay. John, is there anything you want to add to or I don't know if maybe anything about non-Fringe, like doing Kansas?
I mean, so we did do the Kansas collection as part of the Fringe Festival years ago. My situation's a little bit different just because I had just gotten Thymele at that point, and it was under construction, so it was kind of the perfect fit for the show as a dystopian Wizard of Oz in a warehouse that's under construction. So I signed a 10-year lease. That is how I found my own venue. No, I've done a lot of, especially with the Kansas collection. We did 10 different chapters all over the city, and there was a lot of different. We performed at friends' houses. We performed at our own houses. We did pop-up tents, put a bunch of tents together and throw a parachute over the top so it looks like a circus tent. We went downtown to big warehouses and used storage rooms. Yeah, you'd be surprised. I think this is what Katie and Jensen were talking about. You'd be surprised at how a game a lot of people are when you describe what you're planning on, and they're like, "That is so cool." Yes, of course. As long as you're not going to like burn anything or like blow the place up, most people, if you've got a cool idea, are all about it. We did the Speakeasy has kind of a reputation. We find these out of the way spaces that nobody knows about. We do shows there, and then everybody knows about them. So, and then we can't use them anymore because we can't afford it. So a lot of times if you go into a place, you find a place that is cool, a bar, a back room, somewhere off the beaten path, using that kind of in to talk to them to say, in the month of June, there will be 150 people that walk through this door. So using that as kind of leverage to get in there and convince them to let you use the space.
I kind of wanted to bring up, especially after what Katie was saying, about additional like preparations when it comes to safety and permitting and staffing and stuff like that. I know that when I wanted to do a show with a moving vehicle, I'm sure that like Katie, because you rented a limo, that there's certain like insurances intact already with the limousine company. I wasn't allowed to be able to have a moving vehicle with my cast, so I rented out a parking garage for one of my shows and then ran around with like affix things trying to make it look like stuff was moving by the car while like the show was going on inside of it, just and then a lot of that was designed to be done at night, and I forgot about daylight savings time, and we were booked through March, and so it was fine for the previews, but then starting the next week, once sunset was like an hour earlier, our first like half of shows in the evening there'd be too much light to make the practical effect look like that. But I'd love to know about like, some of your guys's, permitting extra additions you want to do for safety and things like that. The reason I don't do shows in my apartment anymore is because of accessibility, because I'm on a second floor. Anything that you guys kind of have encountered with trying to adjust a space for things like that?
It's interesting, Annie, because you made me think about this too with the limo. We couldn't afford to rehearse in the limo. So it was the one variable going into that show that we were so worried about. But because it is a limo company, and like you said, they have their own insurance, and these drivers do this all the time, it was so smooth, which is just exactly what you want out of a venue, right? You just want to have that peace of mind, because that's, as a producer, that's really the hardship that I deal with, and I think we all deal with when you're going into a live show of like, oh my God, what can go wrong will go wrong. What's going to happen? And so much of that is based off of the environment, So yeah, it's really just having like a space that you really trust, and making sure that people are safe, because we've all heard those horror stories about shows gone wrong.
I would say, yeah, the same thing as you go along, as you go to the venue. If you're weirded out by the venue, if you're not, like, if you don't feel confident in the person that you're talking to, and it seems a little sketchy, then it's going to be sketchy. If it's weird when you first meet them and do your walkthrough, it's going to be weird the entire time. Especially if you're using a non-traditional space that isn't a theater or that isn't involved in the Fringe. They're going to get a wedding halfway through and they're going to kick you out. Or there's going to be other things where it may sound fun and cool at first, but then they're going to make a lot of money. So yes, be very sure that you are comfortable with where you are and what you're performing. In terms of like accessibility and stuff like that, we have many times done the if it's like a dark ride situation where you're actually leading the audience from station to station within the show, we have created specific tracks where, like, this does not involve stairs, or this doesn't involve, if we skip this and go straight to here, they'll still get the story, but they won't have to walk all the way around the building to get back to the spot where they were. So just keeping that stuff in mind. And as you're building the show, also keep that in mind of the not just wheelchair accessible, but there are some people that they just don't walk well. So what is that possibility? Climbing, I'm fine walking around, but I can't climb a flight of stairs, or if I do, it takes forever. Which, if you're timed, if you've got a monologue that takes you the distance to get up the stairs and there's someone who's a slow walker, just keep that info in mind. And then with your staffing, set up backstops. If you need to have an extra person, if it's your tech person or if it's your box office person that then has some content that can come in, and if there's someone lagging behind or needs extra assistance, then that extra person can take them in, fill them in on that part of the story, and then get them back in the track.
I would say also just regarding parking, which is a lot of the times going to be difficult in Hollywood. Be aware of where your guests are going to have to park for whatever venue you end up. A lot of times it's going to be street parking. Something that I did with Boston Bar Bloodsuckers is I provided in an email to the guests a map of the general area and kind of highlighted suggested areas, streets to park, because it can get confusing too. If there's like, this street has very limited parking, like 15 minutes, but the signs aren't, you can't really see them very well, especially at night. So to try to set guests up for success, both for safety and accessibility as well, being aware of what areas, where guests are going to be walking through to get to your venue if you don't have parking provided at the venue itself.
I would also just throw out there in terms of safety, and you need to visit your venue at different times of day and night. A venue that looks fantastic at 2 o'clock in the afternoon will look very different at midnight. So make sure that you go multiple times. Something that there's plenty of parking at midnight. At your matinee, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's swamped. So make sure that you visit your venue at those different times, just to see what the neighborhood is like, what the parking situation is like, who else is around at those times.
Yeah, and make sure that you have enough people on the floor at the time. Like, as I said, we started at Pig and Whistle and ended at Pig and Whistle, which meant it wasn't a private space. We were in the general bar, and so we can't account for how the other guests who are not a part of the show are going to act. But luckily, we did have not only the actors on the floor, at the bar, but also we had, a producer that was always there, just making sure that everything was copacetic. Because at the end of the day, this is entertainment. We want everyone to have fun, but it also needs to be safe.
And that having that person we all act in our shows, but having that person that is not part of the story that can, if a situation arises, can step out, handle the situation, and just make sure that everything's going, that they don't have to break character or break the story.
in order to kind of accommodate that for a lot of my shows, I have put myself to have a part that is in a costume, fully in character, but has 0 lines that are actually in the show, so that there isn't anything that is like anyone needs me for a cue or anything to depend on. But also too, if anything that's happening in the show space that I think is unsafe that an audience member is doing, or that an actor doesn't notice is happening, I can step in and point it out without breaking the reality of the show or the scene and stuff. So that, you know, I'm not really there as an actor. I'm there as an onstage stage manager kind of, but you know, that it makes sure everything that is happening is safe. Like I don't have any lines. No, you know, if I'm coming in and saying something, the actors then know that something is happening, you know, like they don't expect me to talk unless it's important. And I don't expect to be spoken to by an actor unless it's important as well, because maybe there's also something that I am missing. But then, you know, the reality isn't broken. I'd love to hear from everyone, you know, because we're kind of starting to get into the nitty gritty of, you know, experience. And we all love immersive theater, obviously, here, or non traditional venue spaces, because you don't need to do immersive theater in a non traditional venue space. You can do regular theater in a non traditional venue space, but you know, sometimes the non traditional space makes it feel more immersive, depends. What do you feel like, you know, the pros are, but like follow maybe each pro with a con, because I know that we're like very passionate about this stuff and we could talk about pros for a while, but like really try and balance out a pro with a con.
I mean, I'll start with Familiar Arts. We've got 4 different spaces. We don't have stages. They're all it's a room. You can set it up like a theater. You can set it up in the round. You can set it up alley style, however you want to do it. That non-traditional space, I think, gives you a lot more freedom to do what you want. You're not confined. You're not confined to a proscenium. You're not trapped in these chairs and trapped in the picture box, the proscenium frame. On the bring your own venue con is that the most places that you're going to go to don't know theater. They don't understand. If you go to a traditional theater, that's what they do. They know load in, load out. Here's this. Here's what's going to happen. There's going to be screaming on stage. Fine. Yes, we do that every Tuesday during acting class. They're fine with it. If you're going to go to a non-traditional space, a bar or a barber shop or the back room of a yoga studio, and something weird happens, they are not going to be as prepared to handle the weird stuff.
Yeah.
Familiar Arts is the best of both worlds.
I am just a total geek for site-specific work. When I was moving away from New York, I was like, oh, I'm moving to LA and I'm never going to do theater. So I got to put on this show before I moved to LA. And now I mostly do theater in LA. Who knows? But I was in love with British kitchen sink dramas. So we put up an adaptation of John Osborne's Look Back in Anger in this historical house in Brooklyn. And it was just so cool. It felt, even though it wasn't technically like an immersive show, the audience wasn't playing a part in it necessarily. It was so cool to just immerse them in that environment. I think, like, to John's point, the con of bringing your own venue, the con of using an untraditional space is also just what are your audience members going to do? What are your guests going to do? If they're roaming, and they're in this untraditional space. Like my first, like technically immersive show that I produced was an office Christmas party. And I couldn't watch the audience members, the entire time I was there. The actors couldn't necessarily either. There were so many different spaces in that office. So that is a little bit of a con where versus like a theater, guests tend to just go to their seats. There's kind of this invisible wall between the guests and the stage. So you can kind of control it a little bit more. With an untraditional space, there's a little bit more chaos, and you really have to just be as careful as possible.
I would say the two spaces I used for my Fringe shows were more traditional than John and Katie have done, in that one was Zoom and one was Three Clubs, which is on the list of suggested venues for Fringe. But, kind of going back to what John said, well, I'll say this. Three Clubs was great for us because it was kind of a big cabaret room that could fit up to 100 people. And like John was saying with Thymele, it actually, the Three Clubs has a small stage because it is designed like a cabaret venue, but it's small and there's tons of space for like immersive characters to kind of walk through, which was great for us because our cast had 8 actors. I think, what John said about going back to, visiting your venue space multiple times. I would also suggest making sure you understand what your venue is going to be like at that time. For example, if it's in a bar, you might have, the main bar in another room still running. And if your actors don't have microphones or mics like ours didn't, you might have bleed over of music playing in the other room that they're going to have to fight. So you always want to make sure you know exactly what the environment is going to be at the time of your show. And don't be afraid to ask like lots of questions to the venue owner of, what exactly should we anticipate at that time.
Yeah, and to Jansen's point too, I mean, that goes back to the actor's health. I'm currently working on a show right now, noise bleed's terrible. So I provided my own mic because I don't want to, vocally hurt myself. So, you've got to put your actor's needs first too. So it's good to just kind of evaluate those kind of things.
I'll also throw out, years ago, I did a production of Tape, which is set in a hotel room. And we did it in a hotel room. We rented a suite, and the bedroom side where the show took place was the performance area. And then we just set up stage in the living room side. And it was the cost of the set. You don't have to build a set because it's set in a hotel room and you're in a hotel room. The con to that is you don't have a full lighting grid. How are you going to light it? How is that going to look? There's ways to, with all of us, you can chat with us, immersive people. There are things that we have discovered over the years. There's ways to hide lighting. Every speakeasy show has a lantern in it. Let's see if I have a lantern. Because when you hold the lantern up like this, all of that light is right on your face. So there's a lot of tricks that you can do. But again, with that, bring your own venue. If it's set in a barbershop, go find a barbershop. Just keep in mind where you're going to hide the speakers, where you're going to hide the lighting system, where's all of that other stuff that comes with a theater.
And also like going on just barbershop, and also what you were saying earlier about using a yoga studio and not knowing and stuff. I did a show in a barbershop a few years ago. Actually, like 7 years ago now, 8 years ago. Time moves crazy. Yeah, 7.5 years ago. What? So we rented it out, and on our third to last night of shows, they had forgot we were coming, and they had decided to take on a few extra clients and be running late. So we show up to get ready, start getting ready, and they are still cutting hair and have like 2 more people in the waiting chair. And we have to just kind of be like, okay, and ask all of our kind guests to just sit in the waiting area and hope that they are okay. Everyone waited the extra hour and a half for their show times. They were so nice. They all really wanted to come to the show. But yeah, it's interesting. But it was really cool to do that show in the barbershop. One of the things that I like to do too as a site specific writer is I write for the space. I tend to like have an idea ahead of beats I'd like to make happen. And then I see a space, and then I come up with a way more fleshed out outline for the script. And then I cast my actors, and then I write my whole script for the actors as well, so that everything kind of feels natural for the space and for the performers, and in a way where it feels like that kind of veil between, reality and this moment that we're creating together works in tandem. I saw that we're getting some questions in the chat. One of the questions is, what kind of mics are you guys using in immersive shows? I've never used a mic in one of my shows that wasn't at a music festival. So I'd love to hear in what mics that you guys use in your kind of more intimate spaces.
I'm going to jump in real quick and then run to the restroom. So I'll do the same thing. We haven't used mics before, unless it was like this person is stepping up on stage. So just the walk around, we haven't done that.
I'll say, yeah, the two shows for Fringe I did, we did not use microphones. If you're using a venue that's, you can always reach out to whatever venue you're working with, and see if they have any provided. Of course, we're talking non-traditional, so a lot of the times that's going to be you figuring out yourself. And yeah, sometimes you might realize during rehearsals, oh, we're going to need microphones for whatever reason. But I don't have any that I would suggest. How about you, Katie?
Yeah, so I put this in the chat, but I've also not had to use a mic for my shows. I've never really needed it, but as a performer, I have my own little Britney mic. It's, one of those little headsets with a speaker on the side, because I host for a living, and I've used that in other immersive capacities. But if I was in a situation again where, there's a lot of noise bleed, like a music festival, like Annie mentioned, I work at Electric Forest. I use my mic there because it's very vocally taxing, especially with the environment. I would definitely provide my actors with something portable like that.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I would love everyone to kind of touch on how using a non-traditional Fringe space, how you adjusted your marketing for that when marketing your Fringe show. I know that you sometimes trying to get people to go to a spot that isn't on the Fringe map, a official Fringe venue, that people, you having to explain that to people, it takes a little more. You have to add stuff. I know the first time I did a Fringe show, when I was doing it at the dance studio that I did it at, which is over on Highland, because it's also not in the main Fringe strip. That also is difficult to get people to come over there for it. So I'd love to hear how you guys have approached marketing, getting people over to your non-traditional Fringe venue spaces.
Again, we couldn't afford the limo prior to the show, so we couldn't shoot in the limo. And I recently so we just shot a bunch of shots of like the cast kind of partying near Pig and Whistle. So it was still kind of in the vicinity, still giving the flavor. But then as far as like the text, I recently heard a saying, the confused mind says no. So we just spelled it out for people. This show takes place in a limo that goes around Hollywood, right? Limo, that was kind of the star of the show. So just really being so clear about exactly what you're doing to entice people so that they're not confused.
You're also you're not necessarily marketing to the Fringe audience. There is a Fringe audience that is going around and seeing all the shows. They're very dedicated and they're going to see a bunch of shows, but you're also trying to get the general public to come. Depending on your venue and what agreements you've come to with them, have them send out a mailing list. Have them send out information about the show, try to get their audience member or their customers to come in. That barbershop, if you're doing it, I go to this barbershop all the time. Let's see what this show is that they're doing there. They've got that trusted audience or their customer base that can easily slide over. We did a show at, again, this is not in the Fringe zone, but at Golden Road Brewery in their back room years and years ago. And we just sent it out to, we didn't market it as, it was Ebenezer, A Christmas Carol. We didn't necessarily market it as the Christmas Carol. It was a burger and beer date night. It was coming out to experience something different. And this is back in the early days of immersive, before people knew what it was. But yeah, connect with your venue. They have a built-in customer base that they have them share that marketing information. And I agree with Katie. A lot of people try to do like in-world, like you're going to go on a magical journey through time and space. No.
Yeah.
Really explain what's going to happen with the amount of anxiety that we had before the pandemic and now our collective anxiety that we have now. Just be very clear. So I know if I'm going to, I know what I'm getting myself into.
Yeah, we're parodying the MTV show Singled Out right now, and we're trying to make it very clear to audience members, this is just a show. It is not, we're not really matchmaking. Don't worry, you don't have to be single to come. You don't have to, conform to either gender. It's gender neutral. It's just a show. It's just fun. We are not, trying to put you in an awkward situation you didn't sign up for.
The worst date night ever.
Yes.
I think that's interesting that you're saying you're not like just trying to promote to the fringers, because I know that I definitely always feel like I want, though, like a large portion of my audience to be the Fringe audience versus just the immersive theater audience. I feel like, a lot of immersive theater creators come in and they create these shows that are not really super price accessible. And when they do that, in order to recoup their costs, because doing immersive shows are very expensive. But really trying to make it still in line, at least somewhat, I feel like, with the normal cost of a Fringe show, ends up making it so it's accessible to the other fringers who are trying to see close to 50, 60 shows an entire Fringe. Because I think that the cool thing about Fringe for me is building that Fringe community personally, and like being able to give comps and things like that. I know like some immersive people come into Fringe and they're like, yeah, my show's too expensive. I'm not going to give any comps to any other fringers who are also spending like their life savings on their shows right now. And I feel like sometimes that to me, like sometimes feels like it's kind of, why then are you doing a show at Fringe versus doing a immersive show any other time of year? And you also don't even get that like bump of like getting to see as many Fringe shows too, because you're not doing comp swaps. I think that like the really awesome part about Fringe as theater creators is getting to see as many other theater creators' work as possible and trying as hard as you can to see other talent that you want to collaborate with in the future. Like I meet a lot of people I want to collaborate with or who I want to showcase their work or talk about them through Fringe. And I think that is like something that sometimes gets lost when people come in because I think that, just based on, those of us that did immersive theater earlier on in Fringe, and people are like, oh, it's like a great place to like do a piece that can be a calling card where people get to know your work or get to know your style as a person, but they don't think of it as that, but then they still like are treating it as something in order to be profitable. I don't usually expect to make money on a Fringe show, like, which sucks because I can't do a Fringe show every year anymore because where I am at, financially, and how much money I'm making right now and how much debt I incurred throughout the pandemic has put me in a situation where I can't really do that the way that I could pre-pandemic. But I just feel like the importance in doing a show at Fringe is to build that community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and your question about marketing, getting an audience there and putting out that information to the general public to get those people to come in, sending out that mailing list, connecting with the venue, all of that. That is one aspect to your marketing. Being involved in the Fringe has its own avenues there. You should absolutely be going to the office hours. You should absolutely be taking postcards around. You should absolutely be meeting with the other artists and doing those comp swaps and doing things like I will advertise my show or your show in my information, and you do the same, that sort of stuff. The nice thing about the Fringe is there is that community, that Fringe family that is built in. If you go out, make those connections, talk to people, shake those hands. But it's also knowing that those 50 people, 100 people are all, they, like you said, are trying to see 60, 80, whatever, however many, desperately trying to get to 10 shows. And you're also reaching out to the other lines of marketing, the larger community.
Yeah, totally.
And one of the benefits of doing an immersive show is you can create multi-tier ticketing where you say, here's a very general audience ticket for however much, but if you want a super VIP experience and are willing to pay more, then we might give you some bonus. You might get to be a bigger part of the show. You might get an included cocktail or something. That's what we did with the Boston Bar Bloodsuckers, and I actually with the sleepover as well. We had like a special, for a bonus VIP ticket, you got something delivered to your house that had a bunch of 90s goodies in it. So going back to kind of what John said, those office hours are a great chance to meet everyone else, to not just say, come see my show, but to really learn about all the other shows happening, and to like kind of go home with a stack of postcards and not just put them in a drawer, but say, like, take some time to go, okay, I'm going to go through each and every one of these now, look up their information, go on Instagram, friend them so I can make those connections. And so it's not just, so you don't like a week later introduce yourself to that same person and they're like, no, we met last week. That's the chance to make those connections.
They're going to be your future collaborators. That's the people you want to do the show with next year.
To piggyback on what Jansen was saying too about the tiered ticketing, the other great thing about tiered ticketing is we all know in immersive, I mean, there's a level of interaction that the audience actually wants. And it's such a great way of filtering out who are those deep divers, who wants to really play a role, who wants to be more of a spectator. It's just a great way to decide that versus such an important role as an immersive performer when you don't have those kind of barriers is figuring out how much interaction your audience member wants from you. And that's just a great way of deciding that before the show even starts.
I guess I have a question for the people who are in the room, who are watching this live. How many, if you can sound off in the chat, are you planning on an immersive show or a traditional theater show in a non-traditional space? So type in immersive or non-traditional and we will silently judge you.
You have 12 minutes. Go.
12 minutes.
I wanted to piggyback on what Katie was saying about trying to identify how interactive people want to be in an interactive show. Um, in a way to do that also without having tiered ticketing too, if you want to just have like a single price. So I did improv show the other year that was like a highly interactive improv comedy show at Fringe. We did it in the Broadwater studio space, but we were like in character, including in line when people were lining up, and when people signed in and also showed us their Vax cards and everything, we asked people, are you are you comfortable participating without being like, are you comfortable being called on or participating? And then we'd put face paint on them, so there is a visual marker. Because also sometimes too, if people are in a space and they're called on without pre-getting consent, you might be activating kind of like something that maybe someone's uncomfortable with, and you want to find ways to make it a safe space for people. I know that sometimes I'm really like, when I first started doing immersive, to me it was like all about like really trying to create that intimacy, and sometimes the intimacy was just created by like creating physical intimacy. But I think that creating these safe spaces where people can give and revoke, and giving a language in a way where they can give and revoke their consent for levels of interaction, is a great way to make it so that then when you are physically intimate, it feels safe with people. Because I know I did one show in a distillery, and there was one point where the actor is like, just feel out for who's like comfortable with you, like putting your mouth on their fingers. And like, maybe not everyone's comfortable with that. Maybe not everyone's comfortable with that. So like,
We've done name tags. Like you do name tags, and then there's a color dot on the name tag depending on their level. I went to Halloween Horror Nights, and I had fun lights on my hat as part of like going to see the show and all the haunted stuff. And I realized that nobody was interacting with me. And then I looked over and I saw several kids who also had fun lights on their hat, and realized that that was the blue light was the do not approach me. So there's different signals that you can do, that you can build in. What is that sign? Letting your audience know. I do see that there's a lot of traditional non-immersive people in the room.
I love that. I love how many traditional non-immersive people in the room is.
And I just want to say quickly, John, you bring up a good point, which is like something like name tags is a great way to differentiate who is there for your show and who isn't. Especially if it's like a big public space that you might have people mixing in and out, and you can't really, it's more difficult to control, who's floating around. That's easier. Also, if you're like leading people through the streets as part of a tour, some physical factor so you can see, oh, these are my people, and anyone who doesn't have that indicator on them, I don't have to worry about counting those heads.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, it helped differentiate. It differentiates traps too. I mean, if we even take the comfort out, in Best Night Ever, whoever was going in the women's vehicle was wearing a penis whistle, so we knew who was going in the women's vehicle, or who was going in the bride's vehicle, and who was going in the groom's vehicle. I can't remember what we did for the groom's vehicle, but we at least had a prop so that we could visually see, okay, who is the guests, who are not the guests, who's going in what vehicle.
Love all of that. Because we have so many people doing traditional theater in a non-traditional space, I'd love to hear from our panelists any experiences you have, doing stuff like that, or any pieces that you've seen that you thought were particularly effective?
Look Back in Anger was that. We just
Yeah.
found the biggest room in that house. We set up the audience. There still was, the rows and the proper audience space, but then we just worked around the space, instead of bringing them into the show. We brought them into the show by proxy of spectator.
I mentioned earlier the production of Tape that's set in a hotel room, and we did it in a hotel room. The audience was still seated. They were seated in the living room area like a traditional theater, and actually the arch that was in between the two rooms kind of acted like a proscenium where you could see into that hotel room. As you're looking around, also just in terms of permitting, make sure that the place that you're doing it is permitted for like large gatherings, for public assembly. So restaurants work quite a bit. They've got the party rooms, or they've got like private banquet rooms. You can easily go into that. Bars have that also, private banquet rooms. Churches, schools, stuff like if the theater has a rehearsal room, or if there's something, just make sure that they've got that permitting. The past few years, well, once we started to do immersive, then the permitting became a huge thing. There was a huge disaster up in the San Francisco area several years ago that really made the city and state like tighten up their regulations on permitting. The ghost ship, if anybody remembers the ghost ship.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, no, it's all weird. It was a warehouse. They were performing. It was a artist live space warehouse, and they had built the place out of pallets. And a fridge caught fire, and then all the pallets caught fire, and there were hundreds of people inside. It was bad.
Yep.
Going back to something that John and Katie both touched on, whether it's traditional or immersive, if you're doing it in a unique, non-traditional space, people are going to get there and might be a little hesitant on where they're supposed to go, what they're supposed to do, especially if you don't have typical, folding chairs or seating set up. So it's always helpful to have whoever's checking them in tell them exactly, where to go, where they can go, give them something to do, especially if they get there, a lot of Fringe is getting there early, so you get a good seat, or so you don't have to worry about parking if, it might be an issue. And so you might get there 20 to 30 minutes before the show starts. And if you're able to let people in that early, telling them exactly where to go and having something there to, keep them entertained or at least occupied, like music playing or something, while they're waiting.
And
This
another
also
thing,
actually, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say something that Jansen made me think of. Your untraditional venue might not have concessions either. I remember I went to a show in a backyard, and when I had been driving around all day, I was super dehydrated, and it was really hard to figure out how to get water, because I couldn't bring in my own stuff. So just figuring out how can you accommodate your audience's needs, how can you have some kind of refreshment stand, because it's probably a similar situation. They've probably been at work all day, traveling to your show, maybe didn't have enough time to properly hydrate, and just making sure those needs are met.
I was going to add too, with non-traditional spaces, this also has to do with concessions. You have to be very aware also, if you end up deciding to sell concessions, like you can't sell alcohol. I feel like this is a very simple thing, but it is something that you need to, if you can have, if you want also there to be alcohol there, you really need to be checking IDs, making sure of that type of thing. And you need to, and if you're doing it, then you want to take donations, you can have donations. You can't have a set price for anything. It's a legal thing. You could fuck up your insurance. Sorry if swearing is not okay here. You could screw up your insurance. Just, maybe err on the side of not doing it, but if you really like want to have it because you know, you want kind of like that vibe, just be safe about it and double check the rules. Also, your venue that you're renting, they might have their own rules because of this. Like, because of their insurance in their building, they might have rules around what type of things you can be serving in your space. They might not even allow food or drink. And so maybe you can have concessions outside of your space or something like that. But yeah, and then also going back, like we've all like, you know, seen a really fun, I don't know if everyone has, but we've all seen like a fun production of Midsummer Night's Dream in the woods, right? Or like, I don't know. I think that's like that's like a easy like example of a fun like traditional theater piece in a non-traditional space that a lot of
I
us
did it
have
at Burning Man.
Yeah. So yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I would love to kind of go back to some of the safety stuff that we've touched on a little bit earlier. I know how I said that I have done kind of the onstage stage manager role, but that's kind of has to do a little bit more with like, you know, how we, you know, mitigate unsafe situations. Maybe if anyone wants to touch on things that you didn't realize were unsafe until it happened to you, and then you now have things in place for stuff like that, or things that you thought maybe should be obviously apparent as a thing to you know, your performers when it comes to safety, and then you have to explain after the fact and change your approach to things. I'd love to hear some examples from you guys.
For traditional shows in a non-traditional space, capacity. There are specific rules for how many people you can fit into a space. Back in college, I built a black box theater in my basement. It was made of old platforms and stuff discarded from the theater, and we put 75 people in this rickety basement every night. And it was very, very dangerous. Had there been a fire of some sort, we all would not have been able to get out. But look at capacity. Even some of these spaces that are they're built for public assembly, but the capacity is 20 because of how the space is laid out. But you want to put 50 people in there. That is a huge safety concern that we've run into a long time, several times. Also like slippery tile. We did an outdoor show. Now it's probably not going to rain in June, but like it was fine until it rained, and then like this tile is a death trap. Someone spilled water. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I know years ago I was in a show where it was a non-traditional space and there was no green room or area for the actors when they were not on stage. And so basically they just had to go outside in kind of a dangerous area and just wait around for their cues and try to listen. So I would say try to make sure that, especially if you have a larger ensemble cast, that they all have just a safe place to wait when they're not performing. That's, you know, part of the venue itself, which can be difficult if you're, you know, if you're like, let's say you're performing at someone's apartment or house, just at least find, you know, making things comfortable for them so that they're not just waiting outside.
Yeah, I mean, luckily nothing bad has happened, but I do think back to like when I started performing immersive and the untraditional spaces I've performed in, especially like, you know, Cloak and Dagger, where we were like in the ice room of the basement of a club, and just, you know, thank God nothing happened, but you're one-on-one with the person, you know, their cameras are not being monitored. So just having some kind of protocol for that, just in case the worst does happen, that you brought down the wrong guest and that they're inappropriate in their actions, just figuring out that kind of safety measure for your actors. Nothing happened to me at Cloak, but just having that kind of protocol.
That actually, yeah, that reminds me of another thing that like happened to me at Cloak, is that there were a couple times that I'd be trying to instigate, like we'd be doing scenes that were either more physically or more emotionally intimate with audience members, and I'd have them be longer because of wanting it to be a safe space and for us to have safety, like check-ins like built into the script. And we kept being yelled at, being like told, like, you have to make it faster. We're not getting enough throughput in audience members. We're not like doing that. And I'd be like, there isn't a really way to make this faster without like decreasing safety. And it's something that like too also, I think to one show that I did once too, like, we didn't put in for one of my shows like a safety protocol with the audience because it was a larger ensemble cast show. And I told everyone, like, make sure you're safe, make sure the audience is safe, but hadn't really put down like if this if then type thing, because it was my first time doing a show with a cast that was that large, that was immersive. Like, usually for the smaller cast, like we kind of would run things down, but I was just thinking, like, there's enough actors here that we can all check in on each other. But I found out one night that, like, some actors after the show were like, oh, I had these like safety issues with an audience member. And I was like, oh no, why didn't you check in with anyone? It was like, oh, we didn't want to ruin the show. And so then I had to take a step back and be like, okay, actually, when we have a cast this large, we still need to have those like check-ins with each other and have a way to have like those check-ins, so that we can like make sure that everyone is safe. And so I had to, like, at the start of the start of open before the next show, like have like a whole, like, be like, hey, can we all come in 30 minutes early? And we go through, if this happens again, like how to make sure that it's safe for everyone. Because I think I just like, it was my like fourth immersive show that I was doing, but at the same time, it was my first time doing one with a cast size that large. All my cast size had been, and I guess actually no, I guess getting to know you was also like that large of a cast, but getting to know you was done like a little bit, like it was very contained. And like, I was also like monitoring every single thing in the room at the time, like as an outside. I wasn't even acting as a character. So I was just like, I was doing checks with each actor personally. And like, if I can't physically go and check with each actor, we needed something in place. And I didn't really think of that until it came up. And so
Then, like when I did haunted houses, there were safe words for the performers, that they could say a word and the stage management supervisors would come in. There was also there symbols. We would do tap of the head like this. So that if I'm all the way across the room and I see someone tap their head, that means I need to get there. And it can be as easy as also like positioning someone in a hallway. We did a show where I was standing in a hallway, an actor walked by with an audience member. And as he walked by me, he said, broken glass. And he just kept walking. Well, I knew where he came from. So I went into that room and like cleaned up the broken glass. So different things like that.
Yeah. And if you're fortunate enough to be doing a show that's like modern, start a Slack for your cast so that you're in constant communication.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. The Slack one is a good one. I haven't had any shows where the actors have their phones out or the actors or audience ever before, but that's like a really good way to do things.
One of the main characters in Best Night Ever was Terrence's mom, who was FaceTiming the whole time. So he had his phone the whole time. And that was great because, she was older. She didn't want to go trek to Hollywood for these, 9 shows. So she could just do it in the comfort of her living room.
And
That's so
writing
cute.
your own show, I mean, you're the master. Build that in. Figure out a way to get that sort of technology or just those check-in spots. Yeah.
Our questions from the chat right now include the people that want to hear more about how much you've spent on your venues and charged for tickets for Fringe shows. I've spent anywhere up to maybe the most I've spent on a Fringe show, I want to say, is about like $1,100 for my space and adding it to my insurance. And the most I've ever charged for a ticket at Fringe is $17. And I've always had at least I've always had like done comp swamps for every show, but some shows, if there's limited audience, I've limited how many comp shop swaps I'll do per evening. And then I've always made it so that all standby tickets for no shows are inherently a comp at Fringe shows. My initial first Fringe, I made half the shows pay what you can. Or no, I made all the shows. Now that I made all the shows pay what you can. Which was a dumb idea because we would have like another group come and they're like, oh, I want to buy all 8 tickets for your whole show. And I'm like, great. And then the entire across 8 people, they'd only give us $7. So I started just like having to at least somewhat gatekeep that just to keep it so that, I made sure that like, it just wasn't completely unreasonable how much money we were making on shows because some of my shows, Fringe shows, yes, have been profitable. Some of them have lost more money than others. But yeah. How about you guys? How much money? Yeah.
I put this in the chat, but Best Night Ever, the limo was, and I talked about this last year, it was $3,000. And as far as the landscape of, the ticket prices for other immersive shows, the highest was like $50. So that's the maximum we could really charge. So moving forward, especially like this year, we're looking to remount one of our virtual shows and looking to do something that's much more pared down for Fringe. Don't do something that's like, unless you have the budget to spend, don't do something that's super grandiose. It's like producing a huge action movie for your first film that you produce, right? Just do something really simple, and really a good budget, because it's not the right event for that kind of show.
I mean, I'll say, the price of doing it on Zoom was the, $15 a month to get Zoom Premium, whatever it was. So it was very, very cheap. When we did the show at 3 clubs, they had a set tier package of, and I apologize, I don't have the numbers offhand, but you could get 3 nights of shows for X amount of money. It came with rehearsal time, and you did have to pay their tech advisor in addition, but it was all it was a great deal kind of for what you got with the space. I would say, just quickly going back to ticket prices and pay what you can, I think we all know trying to get people to buy tickets for your Fringe show is always sludging through mud, because again, it's a community thing and everyone else is busy trying to get other people to buy tickets for their shows. That it's like you've got to have a really good reason for people to want to pay money to see what you're offering. So things like pay what you can, especially if it's like the preview performance, maybe specifically, or like offering discount codes and then being able to track like, okay, what tickets, are selling a lot of like, oh, this one discount code. Okay, I therefore know where those tickets are coming from. It's coming from, something I put on the flyers or, something I'm only giving to people at the office hours. Oh, that's great. I therefore like I'm gonna do more of that to really be able to sell those tickets.
With the venue idea, I mean, Thymea's got the same thing. We've got different packages. Most of the traditional venues will do that. They'll have, here's a 3-show package, here's a 5-show package, here's a 1-show package. You can decide how deep you want to go into it. Look at your budget, look at your ticket prices. You're never going to sell out. You're never going to sell at 100%. So look at what, if you sell 50% of all of your tickets, how much money am I going to make and how does that work into my budget? There's a lot of places you can go to. I mean, the Peer Space is great. There's a lot of spaces on there that are yoga studios or that are the back room, are the banquet hall, are that sort of stuff. But even if you're if you're in a bar, if you're doing something like that, they have a minimum. So if you can guarantee or figure out how you build the drinks into the show or something like that, you build food into the show. When we did Golden Road years ago, that's what we did. We didn't pay for the space. We just guaranteed that the bar would make enough money through food and drink that we could have the space. So there's a lot of ways to do it. And there's been Fringe shows where you start at a spot and then you walk. You're just walking through Hollywood and you're talking to people or stuff like that. Annie, I think, did a show in the park.
Yep. That's actually that was something that Lois just DM'd me to bring up. So
play in the park. The streets are free.
Yep. So there's been some questions about doing shows in outdoor venues. About like what to keep in mind. Depending on your outdoor venue, you might my park the park that I did it in didn't require a picnic permit. Some parks do require a picnic permit for picnics of larger than a certain size. In Griffith Park, technically you're supposed to have a picnic permit for any amount up to 100 people. Like of $100, but I have picnics in Griffith Park all the time. But if you are doing something that's a picnic as a show, you might want to make sure you have the picnic permit. But DeLongpre Park doesn't require a picnic permit. And so I just kind of also then when I got event insurance for it, I got it insured as a walking tour. And a lot of other people I know who got event insurance for shows that they had where they were walking around the neighborhood got insurance of a walking tour. The thing to keep in mind, though, is also I personally, because it's an event inside the park, you also aren't supposed to be allowed to charge money for events inside parks. So it was a free event. And I registered for it, Hollywood Fringe, as a free event. You're not supposed to charge money for things in park. That's why so many people do like free yoga class or things like that. They might charge like a boot camp fee, but like they really shouldn't be doing that unless they have a specialized permit from the parks department for like an event or something like that. So that is some information off that. What was the other parts of this question? They were asking things to keep in mind when doing an outdoor venue. It might rain like this. And you might have to cancel your show. I had a show that was actually at an indoor venue, but we didn't have a waiting space except for outdoors. That was actually at the barbershop. And we had like an outdoor patio area. And we tried to temporarily put up, it was like, I think as rainy, it was like another situation like it was yesterday where it just was pouring rain, and but it was like the first day of pouring rain, kind of. And we tried to set up a tarp. It fell down on people at one point. We also, though, we were trying to also, we hadn't realized it had started raining so hard. It was a drizzle when we got to the space and we were setting up, and then we all of a sudden had we had an audience member show up 45 minutes early for their show and then just walk into our space while we were setting up, and me being like, I'm sorry, I can't have you in here. And then they were like, but it's starting to pour rain. I'm like, I had to be like, could you wait in your car or like do things? And it felt, it kind of took a lot away from the experience, because we only could have people wait out there because we couldn't have people in the space while because it was a 2 audience member at a time show. So we couldn't have people in the show or it'd be ruining the experience for the other people, and also for their future experience, because the show would be spoiled for them. So that's some stuff to keep in mind. Also to keep in mind too, if you're doing shows in public spaces, you're going to have pedestrians coming up to you and talking to you and trying to do stuff. Or also too, like if you're doing check-in and, some people are still coming back through from this past showtime and you're doing more than one showtime at once, an audience member might start trying to come up and talk to you while you're still doing your other show, or, around Fringe, like, someone can come up to you and be like, trying talking to you, be like, this happened to me not during Fringe, but I was doing another show where I was in character and I was walking around acting and being with someone and talking to them, and someone kept being like, Annie, hi, Annie. And I'm like, not Annie. Like, I had to try and be like, oh, sorry, I think you have me miss, like, and they wouldn't stop following me and my audience member around. So those are some things that are more likely to come up when you're doing something outdoors.
You go to Walmart and you can get a pop-up tent, one of those easy up tents. They're pretty cheap. Well, they're like $100, but you can keep them forever and take them camping. Those are nice just for shade. You're outside, you're in the park. It's June, it's going to be hot. There's going to be a lot of sun. Figuring that out, getting a carport or something like that to find those shade locations. There are just helicopters. If you're outside, did a show in a backyard and there was a police action in the area, so the helicopter circled the neighborhood for a half an hour. And then you gotta keep going. We did stop at some point, but like that noise, that hazard. And then if you're just look at the area during the day. At night, the park may be lovely at 2:00 in the afternoon and not lovely at 10 o'clock at night. Look at curfews, especially parks and stuff. If there are, everybody's got to be out at 10. Well, I've got a late show. We didn't know about that. Setting up outside, also look at your tech stuff. If you are planning on doing a more traditional theatrical piece in a non-traditional space, just the amount of setup time of all of your tech, your speakers, your lighting, how you're going to do it. Or if you're leaving it up, what does that look like? And what does that look like in the neighborhood? What does that look like overnight? What does that look like when it rains? Bugs.
Best Night Ever also used along Pre-Park as the second to last stop. And we had police show up one night, but luckily we had one of our producers their car was always parked on the street, because they were also acting as like the actors' Uber, so that whatever actors ended up getting married that night, they went in that Uber, and then the rest of the guests went in the limo. So just having someone to, corral and handle any kind of outside activity is obviously helpful.
You can also tell the police. They love it when you talk to them without an emergency. There's a specific officer. I've got it on a piece of paper around here, but Lois and Ellen can also help you out, that there are specific officers for the Fringe zone. letting them know what you're doing, letting them know that there's going to be a crowd of people doing weird stuff in a parking lot at 10 o'clock at night. They'll be more than happy to take down that information so they don't have to rush over there and interrupt something. The communication with your audience, with your actors, with the Fringe, with everyone else around. Your venue, make sure everybody knows what's going on.
Did you want to add anything, Jansen?
No, that pretty much sums up what I'm thinking. But going back to what Katie said, don't try to take everything on yourself. Make sure you build a team of people who are there with you. Even if it's like there's a situation that you aren't quite sure how to handle, having a second person to like either say, don't worry, I got this, or at the very least be like, let's you and I put our heads together and find a solution for this thing that we did not anticipate. It can take so much stress off of your shoulders. And I know, personally, having tried to uh, produce even just like plays back in college where I was like, I'll just do everything myself. I'll direct and I'll stage manage and, I'll produce. And it kills you because you need that team of people to support you. And if you're concentrating on directing a show or acting in it, you need those other, people, friends of yours to be managing all those other things that you're not thinking of that end up slipping through the cracks if you try to do it yourself.
You're so focused on one thing that you don't see the thing that is that's the thing we should be looking at the entire time. That's the safety issue. Of course I would have thought of that had I not been doing 50,000 other things.
Yeah, and making sure that not everyone's a performer, especially if you're doing immersive, just so that you don't have to force, immersive actors to break the world, that someone else can step in and assist. Obviously, it doesn't always happen. Immersive actors sometimes do have to break the world, but just having that extra person always helps.
Yeah. So another question that was going on from the chat was, what do you see as a typical alternative theater audience person? I don't really think that there is a typical alternative theater audience. I think that you get a lot of people just who are fans of theater in general, but you also get, some people that are not normally fans of theater, and having it in an alternative setting or format makes it more palatable to them. And more exciting and engaging. But, I've had kids as young as like 4 come to my shows, and people as old as like 90, and I've had people of all different races, socioeconomic backgrounds, things like that. I think though that a big thing too is like sometimes with immersive theater, how it can become cost prohibitive, and finding ways to have it available to a lower socioeconomic price point is important, even in any type of show that you're doing.
I think also just like with audience members, when you're going into an immersive show, especially, don't surprise them that it's an immersive show. Like, give them as much information as possible. I mean, I remember doing a corporate job where we were hired to put on this immersive show at their Christmas party, but they didn't tell the employees. And all the employees just wanted to get drunk, and talk with their friends. So it was a really big failure. So onboarding your audience as much as you possibly can. Don't surprise them. Give them as many details as possible. Spell it out so they know what they're getting into.
And on the other side of the spectrum, like, don't hype it up as super immersive and then it's not that immersive. Like, like if the only thing like that is immersive about it is your setting, people who are really big fans of immersive theater will be disappointed, and they will give you bad reviews on the Fringe site, and you don't want that to happen.
For immersive theater, no proscenium is a good reference point for that. I think I don't know where to find it on the website, but there's actually like a vocab list. So you can figure out the difference between a dark ride and a sand pit and different things like that, what immersive theater is. You can just, if this is your first time doing it, if you've not done a lot of immersive theater and you're wanting more information about it, there are some people who get real specific and really dial down onto the different aspects of it. So take a look at that. But I would agree, I've been doing immersive theater and non-traditional theater for over a decade, and I've seen everything. And that was part of the mobility thing we were talking about earlier, where we had one audience, dedicated audience members that would come to every one of our shows. But the woman was husband and wife. The woman was in her 80s and didn't walk well. She was all for it. She was ready to walk, but it just took her forever to move. So we started building that into our story. We know she's coming. This is how we're going to account for that. And then we've had, there's kids. We're like, you're 11 and this content may not be appropriate for you, but your parents brought you, so here we go.
I would say my favorite audience members were the ones that, especially like for the show at the three clubs, just happened to be nearby or at the bar and were like, this, I've never gone to an immersive show, but this looked really cool. The thing on the flyer looked fun and we weren't doing anything else and we had a great time. Those are the people that you never expect to come see your show. And they're like, we can't wait to see whatever the next thing is. Something to add on to something we were talking about earlier in terms of the location for these non-traditional areas is just signage, I think is so important, so that there's no confusion. Make like lots of very clear signs. So especially if people have to kind of park far away, they know the general area of where they're going and they know exactly, the last thing you want is people walking up and getting there late because they're like, I couldn't find the place.
I've gone to shows where the directions, like even though it's super detailed, for me, I got like very confused. Like, they're like, take the first fork in the road. And like, I'm like, is the fork in the road like the paved cobblestone thing here, like leading, or is it like the first time there's actually like pavement, or is it a gravel, or is there a dirt path? Like I was really had trouble, and I ended up walking around a cul-de-sac for like an hour, missing my showtime completely, and I driven all the way out to La Mirada for it, and it was like, no, what did I do? So also, if you have like directions on how to get to a place, troubleshoot, like have other people come without you explaining where it is first, and like see how they do at finding your space.
Send a pin, like, here's your location. Here's a link to the GPS address.
And if you're kind of going back to what Jansen said, if you're producing a show where you want general audience, find a place with foot traffic so you can get that general audience to come in. Some people don't want that. Some people want their secret locations, and then they find out, the audience finds out like right before the show where they're going. There is that avenue too. But if you do want a more general audience, then, have some foot traffic.
Awesome. Okay, so it's 8:30, just past 8:30. We're about 30 minutes out from this ending. Let's open it up to questions from the audience. If anyone has like specific things they want to ask outside the chat or talk about in response to anything we've said, Lois is going to help us popcorn around some people.
I'm going to go over this glossary. It's been years since I have looked at it. There's a lot of fun stuff here.
Also, are you guys going to, in addition to publishing the audio, are you guys going to publish anything from the chat after the workshop?
Oh, we don't do the chat, but I can definitely put in the links into like the chat, so they'll still be available. Absolutely.
Great.
If you do have a question, y'all just put up your little emoji hand or just unmute yourself and we'll find you.
No one has any questions?
You can also type it in the chat if you don't want to.
Yeah, you can still type it in the chat too. Yeah.
They've been pretty good about asking questions throughout, so maybe they're questioned out.
Maybe. And we haven't gotten any questions from the YouTube or.
Nope, but I'm gonna hop back over right now and check.
Okay.
I have a question since I'll let you go first.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just wondering if anybody has any experience like insuring a performance in like a parking lot area, specifically in Hollywood.
Yes.
Yes.
Great questions. So the insuring in a parking lot is just like insuring anywhere else. Not anywhere else, but it's a flat surface. What's really going to get to you is what are you doing? What is the type of production? What does it involve? Do you have are people working on stilts? Are there twirlers? Are you touching audience members? Is it a traditional space? Is there a barrier between the audience? And there's so many different ways to dial down on it. I have an immersive insurance company that I work with. It just takes them forever because they really will dial down on the specifics of what your show is. If you can do stuff like Annie was talking about earlier, where it's like a guided tour or something like that, you can go somewhere that it's much simpler, and you can say a walking tour. But the location has its own challenges. But more than anything for insurance, they're going to ask you, what are you doing? It's very different if you are going to have a birthday party in a parking lot versus you're going to do a fire twirling in a parking lot.
When I insured my show for my parking lot, that was when I did it, when I said I had to rent out a parking lot, leave the car there, and be running around it with stuff so that it looked like the car was moving. We were not really having the audience run around too much. We just did it as a normal like performance art event, like art performance, and insured it that way. And we had rented the space. It was in a parking lot of an apartment building that was going to be torn down. And so they'd already evicted all of the tenants. But we did halfway through our run discover that someone was squatting in one of the apartments. And so I had to try and bring that up to the people we rented from, because I was worried that that might affect our insurance. And so they said they had taken care of it, and I trusted that, and I hoped that I did okay in making that call when we did that.
Gotcha. Beware of squatters.
Beware of squatters. Yeah. I don't know. And beware of any space too, like where if it is a parking lot, like if it's a car park where you have it has gates or not when you're renting the space, is it locked overnight? Who can get into the space? Think of checking everywhere. I think safety wise is something beyond just getting insurance. So we hadn't checked all of the individual apartments because they had said they'd evicted everyone months earlier. And maybe that's something to check, if there are dumpsters, check to see if anyone's in them or things like that before you start your performances for the evening.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you so much.
Somebody actually just dropped the link to my insurance person. If you're planning on getting insurance through them for the Fringe, you need to start now, because they're gonna ask you 50 bajillion questions, so they can really dial into what you are doing and to get you the best rate. So it takes months. There's also like eventhelper.com, which you can get the day of, which I don't think works with the Fringe rules. But you can, if you're doing something like a walking tour or a birthday party, or if you, especially an immersive piece, if you can rationalize this as the same risk level as a birthday party or whatever, you can easily go through them.
And you can also too, if you are working regularly doing performance art, look into your small business insurance too, on getting yourself insured as, a performance artist. And you can sometimes then be able to like put some of the events as an umbrella, like as an add-on to your small business insurance. And then you can be able to like close that off when that, you'll have to, a lot of business insurance is annual, but then you like can open it up at a certain point and then just remember to close it so you can get refunded the rest of the year's amount for whatever. So you're only paying for the months that you're actively doing it, unless you just want to, yeah. So I don't know. And add like, places as additionally insured. Like whatever space your location you're in as an additionally insured, the way that you will be making the Fringe an additionally insured with the Hatchery Arts, your venue would be an additionally insured, which is kind of also what I did with the Broadwater when we did our show there. Instead of paying the $150 for be put on their insurance, I instead spent $35 to have them put on my insurance for the time that I was doing the show.
If you're doing art regularly, it's going to be much cheaper in the long run to get a full year of coverage rather than to do one show, one production.
I have a question from YouTube, if I can pop in. We have Macy Pitt asking, what if I'm doing a confessional booth, like a church? Any tips? Any church tips?
I have so many follow-up questions. Go to a church and do the booth. Make sure the church is cool with it. Episcopalians and Lutherans are more forgiving than Catholics, I have found. But that is, you figure that out. If it's a true confessional booth, then the audience is separated one to the other. My biggest concern would be putting someone that close together. But if you're separated by a little screen or something like that, they're in their own little booth. My biggest concern would be throughput. How many people, if it's a one-on-one interaction, how much are tickets and how many people are you putting through? How many priests do you have? Do you need 5 priests so that you can fit 15 people through? Or if you're only going to do one priest, maybe you only have 5 people. I have so many follow-up questions.
Yeah. Xander, I know, was waiting to ask a question before. Does anyone else have something they want to add to the confessional thing before?
Yeah, just making sure that you figure out a way. Again, I mean, it depends on how many professionals you have, how many audience members you have, how you stagger the people. Where are they going when they're not in the confessional? That would be, my biggest question, figuring those kind of logistics out.
Yeah. I would also say like a large thing too is like, who is your box office person? Because it will take, like, if you have the person doing the confessionals as the same person as your box office person, that's going to ruin the, anonymity of the confessional experience. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and is the same interaction happening every audience member? Because then you've got the problem of, well, what if audience members talk to each other and then there's spoiler alerts? So figuring out if you can also stagger the experience for one another.
Apartment 8 was this, and Death and Coffee, and a lot of other shows I've done that are 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 or 3-on-2 or things like that. All are the exact same experience every single time. But like I always say a lot of times to people, like, even if you have like every scene in one of those shows spoiled to you, it's not going to be the same show though for every single person. It's not going to feel, I think, as spoiled, because the point of those shows is not the surprise. The point of those shows is the emotion that you bring to it when you're in an intimate setting and you're having a question asked to you intimately. It's how you emotionally react to it. And if you're being authentic in the moment, like to who you are as a person. And like every single time you come back to that show, hopefully it will be a different experience, because where you are in your life, you'll be in a different emotional place and space. So I'd say, like, you know, if you're doing something that's that intimate and if you're doing something that's repeatable like that, you know, as long as you're coming from a place of authenticity, I think that it's okay if audience members speak to each other and compare things or whatever.
I do want to know more about the idea, though.
Yeah, me too.
Super interested. I'll go see that show.
I can do a follow-up. We've been chatting on the YouTube. So to follow up, show is called Cocktails, and we are having a Confess Your Sins confessional. The box office person is Satan or a nun. Great follow-up. Thank you, Macy.
Nice. Xander, do you want to ask your question? You've been waiting a while.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. So I'm gonna be producing and acting in a one-on-one or one-on-two experience in a tent, in either like a parking lot or a courtyard or something. So yeah, similar to Elliot, I was wondering logistics about parking lot insurance, but like I'm gonna be researching that. But I'm more so curious if like people have experience producing experiences like within a tent, if they had like a tent suggestion or like where the best locations are, or like I was thinking like noise wise of getting like one of those white noise machines that like you'd put outside like a therapy office or whatever, for intimacy. And it's like a couple tier question, and then just like what to also advice on if it's in like a crowded area of like separating those dynamics of like outsiders versus the people like going into the experience.
Do you have your tent already? Do you know?
I do not.
Okay. The Speakeasy Society did several chapters of the Kansas collection in tents. And we made them look like circus tents. We did their pop-ups. They're the 10-foot pop-ups. We put 2 or 3 of them together to create different rooms. And then we had like bulldog, bullnose, the clips. Use these little clips, zip tie one side of the clip to the tent, and then you can just put fabric in here to create sides. A lot of those tents come with sides, so you can make different rooms. You can use a white noise machine, but like, is there a soundscape? Is there an actual music that goes along in it? You just also have to have, if you're out in the public, if a courtyard is different than a parking lot, a private parking lot is different than a public parking lot. Have those watchers. You're gonna have sound bleed, but like make it part of it.
And also, like, if you're using a public parking lot, you need to make sure you have permission, and you make sure cars aren't going into it while your shows are going on, just for safety and insurance purposes. Or if you have a courtyard, obviously, like, you need permission. All of these things you need permission, which also is like why the Fringe has that nice little checklist for making sure that this all happens in a safe way, I guess.
Xander,
There
are multiple parts to that question, though. What were the other?
I mean, I was just mentioning that like I need to get some sort of insurance, and then it was saying if you had tent suggestions, and then noise bleed advice, and then the last part was advice on creating like a separation between like if there's going to be a bunch of people near like the tent and the performance space, and then the actual space of managing that, where like a ton of people aren't like coming up and like, oh, what is this, or like getting all up in there like while the experience is going on.
Hi, Xander.
Hey.
We did a show together last year. It's just like I was talking about with Best Night Ever, just have an extra hand, have somebody that can manage everything that's going on outside of the tent, while you're performing, just to control those variables. Do you have someone that you're gonna put in place?
Yeah, I'll be having someone at all times. It'll be at least me, like a performer and a like front of house person at all times.
Something that Kansas Collective, I really enjoyed that, John, you all did with that, was having a space before starting your experience. And I think there was like a fireside area to just like chat with people about, I wonder what to expect. I'm looking forward to it. I think there, you could also like have a drink or something there. And then either the same place or another space after the unique one-on-one experience is over, where you can talk to other people and say, what was your, like, half of the fun with I think those experiences is being able to talk to other people, like, what was yours like? Oh, that was different from mine because such and such. It kind of really adds to the flavor of the experience that you don't really get with more typical proscenium shows.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and in the chat, if you didn't see, Lois was commenting how after 11 p.m., there are noise restrictions in Hollywood. So you have to be aware of that too when deciding to do a public piece.
I also say Christmas lights go a long way in a tent. You run Christmas lights. We did that for Kansas Collection. Ran it from one tent to another. White lights over to colored lights, Christmas lights to because the tent is small, it goes a long ways.
I think we have time for like one more question before Lois wraps it up for us. So is there someone that has like a burning final question, or and if no one has a final question, is there's anything else that hasn't been asked that the panelists really think it's important to share? Oh, is it Chase or Chas? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Chaz. Thank you. I had put it in the chat, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle. I'm wondering if there's a resource for sort of a boilerplate agreement between yourself and your non-traditional venue. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about a contract level thing, but it's just good to have like the 5 W's identified, and it's good to have in writing with you and the person that you're engaging with so that both people know. And that came to me because I did one of these traveling shows once where I was the guy with the binder that had all the permissions. And I had to pull it out once at a very high profile venue because there was an assistant manager there that knew nothing about what we were doing. And I had to have something. I was thankful to have something to show them that said, this is what we're doing and this is who we are and this is who we talked to. So we had somebody's name that was in their knowledge. Anyway, so I'm just wondering if there's some place we can go, if this has been developed previously for Fringe, of a basic agreement that says the nuts and bolts of what we're doing.
I don't think there's something for Fringe. Years ago, back when Leia organization was around, a bunch of us were passing around stuff like that. I don't know whatever happened to it. But yeah, it was basically just a one sheet. I can dig through my files and see if I can find something. We've all kind of written it ourselves, and I think you're on the right path with it's the one sheet. Why are we here? What are we doing? Who said we could do it? And then having it on you. There's also any producer any on-site production manager, whatever, should have the book. Here are the people who, when the police show up, here are the people who are in charge. Here's how we get to. Here are the emergency numbers. Here's what happens if.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. If making sure who is going to be there that night, and letting whoever is your contact, making sure that they've reached out to that person ahead of time and told them all the things that have been promised to you, because it always sucks when you get to a venue and you've been promised something and the person who's running it that night goes, I don't know what you're talking about. We've never allowed something like that. You're like, but they said we could. And then it's like, they said versus you said.
That person doesn't work here anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They've been dead for 10 years. Um, and I think another important thing is whoever is your contact, find out whatever their preferred means of staying in contact is. You might get someone who, they give their email address, but it turns out they get so many emails in a day that you send them something and it just gets lost in the shuffle. They might be someone who prefers that if you, especially maybe you have an emergency or just a question that needs urgency, that you just text them. And so, whoever is your contact, find out if I need you, ASAP, what's a good way to reach out to you so you're not waiting too long or almost so long that you forget you asked it and then suddenly it's the day of the show and you never got an answer.
I'll note from the Fringe side real quick, because this is new this year. We have a permission slip of sorts that kind of helps us just make sure that you've thought of all these little things, that you have permission from the venue that you are starting at or nearby that might disrupt. And that can certainly act as a starting point to a more detailed agreement or contract for you. But it lists exactly that, like who's in charge, who said it's okay, what are you doing there, and the dates it'll happen.
I mean, also the checklist that comes with being a venue, that's going to ask the right questions for you to ask the right questions.
And also too, if you're getting permission from a friend, still get stuff in writing. If you know the people, just still get it in writing. Just so you can hold them accountable. I got offered a residency by a friend who owned or was the owner manager of a venue in San Francisco. He told us that part of the residency is that he would house me and my actors. We get to San Francisco and there is nowhere for us to sleep, and we have to sleep on the floor of the theater. So, if these things happen, what?
It's a good bonding moment though, as a cast, everybody
we I think though, me as the producer was just so frustrated and stressed, and there were a lot of other things that went wrong beyond just that. They didn't send out the marketing materials for the event until the week of the event to their email lists, a lot of things like that. Just it was building, and my stress levels were at a 10. And
fair enough.
My cast always is that was so fun. I was like, we were freezing. I had to go to urgent care because I started to have back spasms because I already have spinal issues, and then I was having a flare up and sleeping on the floor. So it was a lot of, and then but so you gotta even if it's a friend, make sure you get everything in writing so you can hold them accountable for it.
And sometimes you need it for bystanders. I mean, this wasn't a performance situation, but I got married on a public beach and I got permission from the city. And as we're setting up our chairs, we had a woman who was suntanning and was getting disturbed. I mean, ruining her suntan, right? Because we're setting up for our wedding. And so we were able to provide that kind of paperwork. I mean, you never know who you have to present it to so that you can go off, so you can do your show.
Yeah. There was one time that I think Katie was there later in the day when this happened, but there was a music festival and I had done multiple venue walkthroughs with the venue manager, and they had shown us a space where we were going to use to set up our performance. And I'd done 2 or 3 walkthroughs with them. We'd gone over it. And then I get there and I realized that, someone had put all this storage stuff in the space that we were going to use. And this person comes in and I'm just kind of looking around trying to evaluate what's going on. And this person comes in and is like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, the event starts in like 4 hours. I was just trying to, he's like, but no, what are you doing here? You're not allowed to be here. I'm like, oh, and then I start talking about the manager of the thing. And I guess this is the venue owner who I've never met or heard their name before. And then he like physically grabs me and like pulls me by my arm out of the room. And like, I like am like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to report it to. It's like a whole thing. We have our event happening in 3 hours. Like, this is like a thing too, where you don't want to get kicked out of the building because you're just the performance artist at a whole music festival. But and so you don't want to like PO the owner of the building, but also, you know, you don't feel like safe being in the same room as them and things like that. And like, you know, there's so many things can happen with like events like this and stuff.
So get a non-traditional space.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Oh, no, y'all, thank you so much, Annie, John, Jansen, Katie. This is amazing. And I think like this is going to get everyone thinking about, because now's the time, right? They have multiple months to get all of these steps in place. And so know if you're going the non-traditional venue route, email support@hollywoodfringe.org. First, we are here to support and we'll make sure you don't miss a beat, because legally we have to make sure you don't miss a beat. So no, just communicate with us and the journey won't be so taxing. With that, thank y'all so much. Happy Monday.